Hello guys, so I'm Shifan Akram. So as we know that there is only another 1 month for the A-level exam, not even 1 month, less than 1 month, and biology being one of the first exams, so I thought of making a video on expected essay questions for the A-level biology 2025 based on Unit 5 Human Physiology. So as we know, human physiology is a very long chapter. There are a lot of chapters on that and a question is given every year based on it, and even on certain years they even give short notes on it. So let us take a look at that also. So in this video I'll be discussing the past papers from 2024 to 2019 and the past paper essay questions based on unit 5 on that, and using that we'll see what we can expect this year. So I'll start from 2019. So before I start, one thing I want to tell is, so I'll be writing down all the expected essays for this year. So if you feel it is important, please take a note of it. Okay, now let's go through the question. Okay, so the last time they gave a question on gas exchange was on 2019. So there has been no question on gas exchange for the last 5 years. So there's a very, very high possibility that you might get a question on gas exchange this year. And another thing is, last time they gave a short note on Unit 5 was in 2019. It was about the energy budgets of animals and fetal membrane. So this time you might get a short note. So please get prepared for that too. So the energy budget of animals, which was based on the unit nutrition, and fetal membranes, which was based on reproduction. So last year also they gave an essay based on nutrition. So which was explain the role of liver in human nutrition and how digestion is regulated. So this year, the chances of getting a question on nutrition is really low. And also fetal membranes, which is reproduction. And last year also, they gave two questions on reproduction about the second and third trimester of pregnancy and modern reproductive technologies. So this year, it is really low getting a question based on reproduction. So when it comes to gas exchange, they have already gave the mechanism of ventilation and homeostasis of breathing. So the chances of getting those are really low. So let us see the questions we can expect this year. So the first one is the structure and function of the human respiratory system. So I'll write it down. So in this essay, you had to write about the main parts of the respiratory system, such as the nostrils, mouth, the larynx, pharynx, the bronchi, the bronchioles, and alveoli and their functions. And also, you had to talk about the lungs, right? The shape of the lungs and the membranes in the lungs. And you can also talk about the air passage, right? The opening of glottis and epiglottis and how they are related. How when food enters we can't breathe. You can talk about that. Then also we can also talk about cilia and mucus. So how cilia traps mucus and pushes it out of the air passage using the epithelial cells. Then finally we can talk about gas exchange in the alveoli. So one thing to remember is that they will give you a separate whole essay based on gas exchange only in the alveoli. So but here you don't have to explain it in detail, but you can only explain the important points. So the second essay is, as I told, gas exchange in the alveoli. So here you had to write it in detail. So here you had to talk about the types of respiration, internal respiration and external respiration, then how diffusion of gases through partial pressure. And then we can talk about the partial pressures in the alveoli, in the blood and the tissues. Then also we can talk about external respiration first. Respiration and how CO2 diffuses from the alveoli, sorry, O2. O2 diffusion in the alveoli. And CO2 diffusion from the blood into the alveoli. And about how oxygen binds with hemoglobin to form oxyhemoglobin, right? Right. Then also you can write the equation of oxygen and hemoglobin to for the formation of oxyhemoglobin. Then you can talk about internal respiration, which happens between the blood and the tissues. So here again you can talk about the partial pressures there and how diffusion occurs. Uh, yes, so that's it there. So the next essay you can expect is on common disorders of the respiratory system. So I'll write it down. So when it comes to the common disorders of the respiratory system, you can talk about all the diseases that affects the respiratory system. So here you can talk about smoking, how smoking affects the respiratory system, then silicosis, then asbestos, and also talk about tuberculosis, right? Because tuberculosis is also there in the resource book. Then asthma. So you had to talk about all these diseases in the common disorders of the respiratory system. Then also they will give you a separate essay based on only on the effects of smoking. So go through that too. How smoking affects the lungs and the respiratory system in the lungs. So these are the main four essays you can expect this year on gas exchange. And when it comes to short notes, you can expect a short note on lung capacity and respiratory cycle. So that's it for there. So if this is helpful, please take a note of it. So now let's go through the 2020 paper. So in 2020, the question was briefly explain the basic structure of the human eye. So this is related to sensory structures. So guys, really pay attention here because there's a very high chance of an essay question from sensory structures this time because it hasn't appeared for a very long time. So what are some questions that we could get this year? So let us take a look at that. So first they might ask you to explain the structure of the human ear. That's one possible question. I'll write it down. So when it comes to the structure of the human ear, we had to talk about how the human ear is divided, right? Division, the middle ear, the outer ear, and the inner ear. Then we had to talk about the outer ear, right? And all the structures inside the outer ear, like the auricle and the auditory canal. Then we have to talk about the middle ear. So, and all the structures present in the middle ear. So, in the middle ear, we have ossicles and auditory tube, right? Ossicles such as the three bones in the ear, and we have the auditory canal, sorry, auditory tube. So again, so in the inner ear, we have to talk about all its structures. So the inner ear contains semicircular canals and cochlea. So this is just a guide about all the structures you have to talk about. Then yeah, that's it there. So you have to talk about all these things. And another expected question is the role of ear in hearing and balance. So I'll write that down too. The role of ear in hearing and balance. So as we know in the book, they have given the role of ear in both hearing and equilibrium. So we have to write about it. So when it comes to hearing, we can talk about how stimulus is converted to nerve impulses. Then we can talk about how sound is concentrated in the middle here. Then we can also talk about the transmission of vibration through the middle ear and the inner ear. Then we can talk about the activation of hair cells. And finally, what happens after the sound is transmitted. So after sound perception. So these all you can write in the process of hearing after sound activation. So when it comes to equilibrium balance, so it has its own functions. So when it comes to equilibrium, we can talk about the semicircular canals, the vestibule, tricle and the saccule, and also the hair cells and potential changes. And finally, we can talk about the semicircular canals and the angular movements that happens inside the ear. So I'll write them all down. So that's it there. So another essay question that you could get this year is the structure and function of the skin, because they haven't asked the structure and function of the skin yet. So that's a potential essay question. So in there we can talk about the skin layers, the epidermis and dermis, and we can talk about the layers of epidermis, then the layers of dermis, the melanocytes, right? Right. Then we can also talk about the thickness of the epidermis and how they are supplied with blood. And also about keratin, right? So when it comes to function, we can talk about protection and regulation of temperature, and synthesis of vitamin D. So these things you can talk in the functions of the human skin, and also excretion of products. So these are the potential essays you could get regarding sensory organs. And one final essay, they might ask you to explain, but the probability of getting this essay is really low, but they might also ask you to explain the types of sensory receptors. So I'll write it there. So this they might ask you has a short note too. There's a possibility for that too. So that's all there for the when it comes to sensory structures. And now let's go to the 2021 paper. So the question that was based on Unit 5 was describe the structure of human pancreas and explain the role of human pancreas in digestion of food. So both of these questions are based on nutrition. So the second question is discuss the innate immunity of the body against pathogen invasions. So immunity is a topic to consider. It's not a very large chapter, only about 8 parts. So an essay may or may not come this year, but don't stress too much on it. But if a question does come from immunity this year, it could be explain the role of T lymphocytes and B lymphocytes in adaptive immunity. So let me write it down. So be a little prepared with immunity to be safe. So we don't know what they will ask, right? So another question could be specify and explain the disease associated with the immune system. So that's another question, you know. So these two questions, please be prepared with that, just to be safe. So that's all in the 2021 paper. So let's go through the 2022 paper. So here they are asking to draw a full label diagram of the functional unit of the human kidney with associated blood vessels. And the second question, describe the process of formation of urine in men. So I have never heard of a question like this, draw a fully labeled diagram of the functional unit of human kidney. So always expect the unexpected. So part B was easy, describe the process of urine formation. So this is about excretion. So based on this topic, what can we expect in this year's paper? So they might ask to briefly explain the diversity of excretory structures in animals. Right, so this is a question that hasn't come before, so we can expect it. I'll write it down. So that is a question to expect. And you can also expect another question like explain the contribution of hormones in the function of kidney. So hormones such as ADH and aldosterone. So they might ask you explain how they contribute to the function of the kidney. So that is another potential question. So I'll add that too. And there can be another question against diseases related to the urinary system. So let me write that down too. So they might ask you all the diseases that is connected with the urinary system. So these are three essays based on excretion and kidneys. So please go through these three parts, so that you can be prepared. Okay, now let's go through the 2023 paper. So this was the year before the most recent year. So they have asked to briefly describe the structure of the wall of the human heart and again explain the coronary circulation and the consequences of the blockage of coronary arteries in men. So both of these questions are based on circulation. So last year there was no question on circulation. So this year we can expect a question. So they might ask you to explain the structure of the human heart. So I'll write it down. So, and they can also ask a question about the closed and open circulatory system. So that comes, they'll ask to explain. They could also ask a question about the basic plan of the human circulatory system. So the base again, they can also ask the basic plan of the lymphatic system. So go through all these topics. They could also ask a question about the conducting system of the heart. And there's also the possibility to ask a question about the cardiac cycle. Maybe they'll give a short note to write about the cardiac cycle. So, any other questions they might ask? Yeah, okay. So in these six questions, they might ask one of them if circulatory comes in the next paper. And on 2023 paper, they also asked explain how blood glucose level is regulated in men. So this is about homeostasis. So an endocrine system. So if you take the endocrine system, they might ask like 2 to 3 questions. They might ask about the hormones secreted by the hypothalamus and state their functions. And same for the pituitary gland, they might ask the hormones secreted by the pituitary gland and ask you to state their function. So, and they might also ask the role of the adrenal glands in homeostasis. But this time, I feel a hunch that they'll ask about the feedback mechanisms because blood glucose has already been tested. in the earlier papers. So thermoregulation and osmoregulation are possibilities. So go through those feedback mechanisms. So I'll write it all down so that you'll remember it. So these three are potential questions they could ask based on the endocrine system. And they might also ask a question about the liver. So these are four questions based on the endocrine system. So go through that too. So that's it for the 2023 paper. And let's go to the 2024 paper. So again, in the 2024 paper, they have asked to describe the role of the liver in human nutrition and again how digestion is regulated in men. And they also have included a question about reproductive system, changes that takes place in the human fetus during second and third trimesters. So, and again, the next question about modern reproductive technology that can be used in resolving infertility problems in humans. Okay, so first question is about the seventh question here is about the nutrition, and the eighth question is about reproduction. So, there's very less possibilities that these two topics will come for the next exam because it was there last year, so the possibility is really low. So focus less on reproduction and nutrition, but you do have to do the structured essay paper and the MCQ paper. So in that case, you have to go through that as well. There's no other way. So that's it there. Okay, now let's go through some questions that we have never got in the A-level paper. So first we have never got any question based on tissues, right? So they might ask a question about tissues. So they might ask you about the connective tissue, nervous tissue, or maybe something like briefly explain the structure of the motor neuron. They could link this to nervous system and ask you how action potential is transmitted. And also questions about the blood, components of blood groups, and about the skeletal muscles, smooth muscles, and cardiac muscles. So be prepared for that too. And they might also ask you questions like explain the types of simple epithelium. So study all the types of tissues, go through that chapter, because you never know, right? And when it comes to nervous system, study the parts of the brain, then organization of the nervous system, then most importantly, go through sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system too. Then again, this is really important for structure to the mechanism of generation and transmission of nerve impulse. Then again, synaptic transmission. These are all, and also learn to draw the transmission of a synapse. And when it comes to the skeletal systems, learn the skeletal muscle and the mechanism of skeletal muscle contraction, sliding filament theory. Just definitely study that and be ready, because there's a very high possibility that it might come. And also adaptation of the upper limb for a wide range of movements. And when it comes to skeletal system, they might also ask to explain the structure of the human skull and maybe some other disorders related to the skeletal systems. So prepare for all this. If you are ready with all these essays, you don't need to be scared for the exams, right? You can go with confidence and write because whatever you studied will come for the exam. So please make use of your time, don't waste it. Don't need to study 16, 18 hours a day. Maybe if you can focus it, just do it, or else just study 8 hours a day, but focus fully on studies. Just keep your phone aside, so that you could focus. That way, you could really get great results. So that's it for today. So I will end this meeting. And if you have any doubts regarding the exams, the questions, please drop a comment and I will reply. Thank you. So if this class was useful, also share it with your friends. So until we meet again, bye.